إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما لبيك اللهم لبيك اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم وترحم على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما ترحمت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم وتحنن على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما تحننت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم وسلم على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما سلمت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد في كل لحظة أبدا عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وكرم بقدر عظمة ذاتك العليا صلى الله عليه في كل وقت وحين أبدا صلى الله عليه عدد ما علمت وزنة ما علمت وملء ما علمت صلى الله عليه على سيدنا ومولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد صلى الله عليه صاحب التاج والمعراج والبراق والعلم صلى الله عليه ودافع البلاء والوباء والمرض والألم صلى الله عليه جسمه مطهر معطر منور صلى الله عليه من اسمه مكتوب مرفوع موضوع على اللوح والقلم صلى الله عليه شمس الضحى بدر الدجى نور الهدى مصباح الظلم صلى الله عليه أبي القاسم سيد الكونين وشفيع الثقلين صلى الله عليه أبي القاسم سيدنا محمد بن عبد الله سيد العرب والعجم صلى الله عليه نبي الحرمين محبوب عند رب المشرقين والمغربين صلى الله عليه يا أيها المشتاقون لنور جماله صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. في كل وقت وحين أبدا عدد ما علمت وزنة ما علمت وملء ما علمت على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد صلاة تكون لك رضا ولحقه أدى وأعطي الوسيلة والفضيلة والشرف والدرجة العالية الرفيعة وبعث المقام المحمود الذي وعدته وجزه عنا ما هو أهله وجزه أفضل ما جزيت نبيا عن أمتي وصل على جميع إخوانه من النبيين والصالحين إلى يوم الدين يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وكرم بقدر عظمة ذاتك العليا في كل وقت وحين أبدا عدد ما علمت وزنة ما علمت وملء ما علمت على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد صلاة تكون لك رضا ولحقه أدى وأعطي الوسيلة والفضيلة والشرف والدرجة العالية الرفيعة وبعث المقام المحمود للذي وعدت وجزه عنا ما هو أهله وجزه أفضل ما جزيت نبيا عن أمته وصل على جميع إخوانه من النبيين والصالحين إلى يوم الدين يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وكرم بقدر عظمة ذاتك العليا في كل وقت وحين أبدا عدد ما علمت وزنة ما علمت وملء ما علمت على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد صلاة تكون لك رضا ولحقه أدى وأعطي الوسيلة والفضيلة والشرف والدرجة العالية الرفيعة وبعث المقام المحمود للذي وعدته وجزه عنا ما هو أهله وجزه أفضل ما جزيت نبيا عن أمته وصل على جميع إخوانه من النبيين والصالحين إلى يوم الدين يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وكرم بقدر عظمة ذاتك العليا في كل وقت وحين أبدا عدد ما علمت وزنة ما علمت وملء ما علمت على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد صلاة تكون لك رضا ولحقه أدى وأعطي الوسيلة والفضيلة والشرف والدرجة العالية الرفيعة وبعث المقام المحمود للذي وعدت وجزه عنا ما هو أهله وجزه أفضل ما جزيت نبيا عن أمته وصل على جميع إخوانه من النبيين والصالحين إلى يوم الدين يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وكرم بقدر عظمة ذاتك العليا في كل وقت وحين أبدا عدد ما علمت وزنة ما علمت وملء ما علمت على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد صلاة تكون لك رضا ولحقه أدى وأعطي الوسيلة والفضيلة والشرف والدرجة العالية الرفيعة وبعث المقام المحمود للذي وعدت وجزه عنا ما هو أهله وجزه أفضل ما جزيت نبيا عن أمته وصل على جميع إخوانه من النبيين والصالحين إلى يوم الدين يا أرحم الراحمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم يا عظيم سلطان يا قديم الإحسان يا دائم النعم يا كثير الجود يا واسع العطاء يا خفي اللطف يا جميل الصنع يا حليما لا يعجل صل يا ربي على سيدنا محمد وآله وسلم وارض عن الصحابة أجمعين. اللهم لك الحمد شكرا ولك المن فضلا وأنت ربنا حقا ونحن عبيدك رقا وأنت لم تزل لذلك أهلا يا ميسر كل عسير ويا جابر كل كسير ويا صاحب كل فريد ويا مغني كل فقير ويا مقوي كل ضعيف ويا مأمن كل مخيف يسر علينا كل عسير فتيسير العسير عليك يسير. اللهم يا من لا يحتاج إلى البيان والتفسير حاجاتنا كثير وأنت عالم بها وخبير. اللهم إني أخاف منك وأخاف ممن يخاف منك وأخاف ممن لا يخاف منك. اللهم بحق من يخاف منك نجنا ممن لا يخاف منك. اللهم بحق سيدنا محمد اخرسنا بعينك التي لا تنام اكنفنا بكنفك الذي لا يرام وارحمنا بقدرتك علينا فلا نهلك وأنت ثقتنا ورجاؤنا. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. اللهم إنا نسألك زيادة في الدين وبركة في العمر وصحة في الجسد وسعة في الرزق وتوبة قبل الموت وشهادة عند الموت ومغفرة بعد الموت وعفو عند الحساب وأمانا من العذاب ونصيبا من الجنة وارزقنا النظر إلى وجهك الكريم. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين في كل لحظة أبدا عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والجنة للموحدين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق والمرسلين نبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. All praise belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the choicest of blessings and salutations upon our Master Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We continue with our reading of the Al-Miftah li Bab al-Nikah by Sayyid al-Alama al-Da'iya ila Allah al-Habib Muhammad bin Salim bin Hafiz. I read. Starts from وظيفة متولي عقود الأنكحة.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى سيدنا محمد. من كتاب مفتاح لباب النكاح لحبيب علامة محمد بن سالم بن حفيظ، نفعنا الله به وعلومكم في الدارين آمين. وظيفة المتولي عقود الأنكحة. ينبغي للمتولي عقود الأنكحة إذا طلب منه أن يباشر عقد النكاح، سواء كان هو الولي أو كان سفيرا أو محضا، أن يسأل قبل مباشرة العقد عن أمور، منها أن يسأل عن الزوجة هل هي بكر أو ثيب، فالبكر هي التي لم تزل بكارتها بوطء بأن لم تزل أصلا أو زالت بغير وطء كسقطة واحدة حيض. والثيب هي من زالت بكارتها بوطء سواء كان حلالا أو حراما أو وطء شبهة، فإنه لا يوصف بالحل ولا بالحرمة. فإن كانت بكرا جاز للأب والجد فقط دون غيرهما من سائر الأولياء تزويجها إجبارا ولو قبل بلوغها، بشروط كون الزوج كفؤا موسرا بمهر المثل، ليس بينه وبينها عداوة لا ظاهرة ولا باطنة، وليس بينها وبين وليها عداوة ظاهرة. فإن فقد أحد هذه الشروط لم يصح النكاح. ويجب أيضا أن لا ينقص الصادق عن مهر المثل، وأن يكون حالا من نقد البلد. أما إذا لم يكن لها أب ولا جد فليس لأحد من سائر الأولياء أن يزوجها أي البكر إلا بعد بلوغها واستئذانها، ويكفي في إذن سكوتها. ويستحب للأب والجد إن كانت بالغة استئذانها، وإن كانت
نعم عليك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. الحبيب محمد bin Salim bin Hafiz rahimahullah tabaraka wa ta'ala, he engaged in a topic advising those people who, as we would say locally, put through marriage contracts. And that could either be the wali, or it could be the wakil of the wali, who in most instances happens to be the imam. Or it could be a person or it could be the qadi, or someone that was appointed by the qadi. If someone was appointed as an individual to perform nikahs or put through nikahs, as we would say, then it's a condition that that person, in most instances the imam or the person whom the qadi would be placing and giving authority to perform nikah, especially for such women folk that do not have a wali, it's a condition that that person must be a male, that the person must be free, that he must be a Muslim, that he must be duty bound, mukallaf, that he must be a person of integrity, adl, and most importantly, or equally importantly, is he must be a jurist or someone knowledgeable of the important necessary masail from the chapter of Kitab al-Nikah. And that's a very important thing. If someone do not hold the qualities of knowing the details that is required for him to know in relation to putting through nikah, then such a person should not be performing nikah. And the Qadi cannot appoint such a person to perform nikahs in a community. So he should know the durations of iddah, because the iddah differs from one lady to another. He should know and be able to calculate whether a lady's iddah has expired or not. He should know what is a valid divorce and what is not a valid divorce. We have instances where a lady imagines that she was divorced by her husband. So she thinks that she is divorced and she thinks that her iddah expired, and then she meets another individual and he expressed interest in marriage, and then he wants to marry this lady, thinking that she is unmarried, only to find out later that she was not divorced in the first place. So the person that's going to be putting through the nikah, who's going to be performing the marriage contract, needs to know what is a valid talaq and what is not a valid talaq. So that when a lady was married before and now she was divorced and her iddah went through and she found another spouse, he must be able to know. Otherwise, he will marry off that lady. If he doesn't know what's a valid divorce from an invalid divorce, he will marry her off to another man while she is still married to a previous husband. And therefore, generally, imams and persons that are in charge of putting marriages through are encouraged to ensure that the lady receives a divorce certificate. So the divorce certificate, generally which is issued by the Muslim Judicial Council, it gives the imam some sense of contentment that the lady is actually divorced and her marriage has ended, in which case this person can now go ahead and perform the nikah. Now, so he needs to know masail related to nikah, regarding durations of iddah, how iddah expires, what are explicit divorces, what are figurative divorces, and so forth and so on. The person that is in charge of putting nikah through, marriages through, does not need to know other chapters of fiqh. A person who is going to be putting nikah through, a qadi appoints him as a responsible person to put nikah through, or an imam of a masjid who fulfills the function of marrying people off. It's not a condition that he knows the details of the chapter of business law. If we ask him what is bay'ul aina, or we ask him what is mu'atat, or we ask him what is salam, and he has no clue what we're speaking about, like many brothers and sisters and online viewers don't know what I said now, then that does not matter. Why? Because he must be familiar with the chapter of nikah. He does not need to be familiar with the chapter of Islamic business law, or he does not need to be familiar with other chapters of fiqh. Now, also the person that is putting nikah through, the imams or someone that the qadi has appointed, cannot be blind, neither can he be deaf, nor can he be dumb. If it's a blind imam or a deaf imam, then they cannot perform marriage contracts. So he said that it is essential for the person that is in charge of facilitating marriages, when he is requested to perform a marriage, that he, irrespective whether it's the wali or whether it's the wakil, that he needs to ask the lady before putting the nikah through he needs to ask her a number of questions. The first question that he needs to ask her is that he needs to determine, is she a virgin or is she a non-virgin? He needs to ask her, هل هي بكر أم ثيب? Now, in our community, there's a question that what one normally needs to ask even before this question. Before determining whether the lady happens to be a virgin or a non-virgin. In fact, the question of whether she's a virgin or a non-virgin is generally a question that one does not need to ask within our community. Why? For the simple reason that the question of whether she's a virgin or a non-virgin only has bearing if the father is marrying her off without her consent. And the scholars, they call that wilayatul ijbar. So the father and the grandfather of a girl, the father of a girl and the grandfather of a girl, they have such an authority that they can marry off that girl, no matter what her age, to whomsoever they wish, as long as certain conditions are fulfilled without her consent. What those conditions are, I'm going to discuss it in a moment. Right? Now, he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, that we must know, the person must determine the girl that wishes to marry, is she a virgin or a non-virgin? Because if she is a virgin and her father is marrying her off without her consent, then that's the first condition that is met, and the father may do so. But if she's not a virgin, then it's important now for the person that is facilitating the marriage contract to determine, if she's a non-virgin, whether she has granted her consent or not. You understand that? So he's saying the first thing he needs to know, is she a virgin or not? If she's a virgin, then we don't need to determine whether she has given consent to the father or not. And if she's a non-virgin, a thayyib, then we must ascertain whether she actually gave consent to the father. So why I'm saying this question is generally not required to be asked in our community is because here we don't find fathers marrying off their daughters without their consent in any case. Right? I don't know of an instance within our community ever where a father practiced his authority as a wali mujbir, the wali that has the power to marry off without his daughter's consent, actually doing so. Right? And most of the times, my practice generally is, when we do have these meetings, if a lady wishes to get married to a young man, I normally call a meeting with the parents and the bride and the groom. Right? I call them all in for a meeting. And the general setting is that she has already given her consent or she is eager to get married. So determining whether she is a thayyib, which is a non-virgin, or a bikr, a virgin, is almost irrelevant. And therefore the benefit of that really is that it saves you from a very uneasy question. Right? So now somebody may read, I need to ascertain is she a virgin or not. Now you ask the question, which can be very offensive or very difficult or very problematic, while there's no need for it because she's giving consent. She's there because she wants to get married. Right? So that's something important to keep in mind. A question that must actually be asked before this, and perhaps Habib Muhammad, because they come from a very religious environment, he has not added it here because it's not something that often occurs. But in our community, one thing that needs to be asked, even before ascertaining whether the girl is a virgin or a non-virgin, you need to ascertain whether the father is actually the wali or not. Because if the girl was born out of wedlock, right, then she is considered to be an illegitimate child. A bintu az-zina, a child that was produced through fornication or adultery, in which case the father is not the wali. So what may happen is, a man may have had sexual relations with a lady, and then the lady fell pregnant, and then 5 or 6 months later he married the lady. If the child was born before 6 months have passed within the marriage, then the child is considered to be illegitimate. If they marry quick and the child is born after 6 months, then many of the ulama say the child will still be considered legitimate, even though there were some Shafi'is that also said the child will be illegitimate. There's a debate. Our practice usually at the Muslim Judicial Council is, if the child is born after 6 months, we consider the child legitimate, based on the views of those many Shafi'i ulama that said she is legitimate. She's legitimate, sorry. So if the marriage takes place and the child is born before the passing of 6 months, the child is illegitimate. If the child is born after 6 months, the child is legitimate. The proofs, I need you to grasp the facts before I furnish you with proofs and evidences. Right? You can see now, some of the discussions within fiqh become very intricate. It's all based on proof, all have evidence. Sometimes when you're living in a world of just studying salah, like many young people that are sort of driven, I'm not Shafi, I don't follow madhab, I follow Quran, I follow Sunnah. They're studying very basic tahara, how to make wudu and how to make salah, where things are very simple and the proofs and evidences are somewhat easy to comprehend. But once you get into the intricacies of fiqh, then you will realize, first of all, you develop a great sense of fiqh, a great sense of reliability within the ulama that have documented this fiqh, and you understand that they have never ever drifted away from the book of Allah and from the sunnah of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then you become perhaps less focused on evidence, what's your dalil, and you just try to understand what they are actually saying, because it becomes intricate, right? No. So if the child is born before 6 months, legitimate; after 6 months, illegitimate. Now why is this a challenge? Because if a father marries off his eldest daughter, then the more important question to determine if I'm going to be performing this nikah is the eldest daughter legitimate or not? And therefore when you sit down with the father, this is a question that needs to be covered. My first question I ask a father is this your eldest daughter or not? If it's not the eldest daughter, then it's a given that the child will be legitimate. The question is only going to be on the eldest child, because that's a question mark. Did you get married immediately? Did you not get married? There is the only possibility where the child could have been, generally, unless he had a child out of wedlock, and then with the second child decided to get married, which is also a possibility. But more than likely, if it's not the eldest child, then the daughter would more than likely be legitimate. It would be a child that was born within wedlock. So that's the first question that needs to be established. If a child was born within wedlock, then the father is the wali, the guardian, that has the authority to marry her off. Allah gives him that wilaya, that authority to marry off his daughter. If the child is illegitimate, and then you leave the father to perform the nikah, or the father appoints the imam to perform the nikah, then the nikah is batil. Nikah is not valid. Because how did she get married? On whose authority? On the authority of the father. But the father is not the wali. Which means that in the absence of a father not being a wali, because she was conceived and born out of wedlock, then that authority now shifts over to the sultan, the sultan, and the sultan usually appoints beneath him qadis, qudat, right? So the authority lies with him. Similar to this, I may have mentioned previously, is a lady that became Muslim. If she became Muslim, her father is non-Muslim. If a father is non-Muslim, a father does not have the authority to act as a wali to marry her over. The sultan, or those who represent the sultan in our community, is going to be the qadi. He holds that authority. So if a lady is illegitimate and the father marries her off or appoints someone as a wakil, the biological father, that is, the nikah won't be valid, because that authority lies with the qadi. The qadi must be contacted, or one of the, in our situation in the Cape, I may have explained previously, we all know that our dear beloved friend, Shaykh Muhammad Falande, is the Qadi of the Muslim Judicial Council, and the other members of the Fatwa department, the Mufti, which would be myself, and the other members that serve within the Fatwa department are also Qadis that sort of assist Shaykh Muhammad in fulfilling the various functions that a Qadi needs to fulfill. So he appoints the members of the Fatwa committee as Qadis to perform such nikahs, so they also hold authority. Or what would happen in many cases is, if Sidi Zuhair is the Imam at a masjid and he has a case where a lady wants to get married and she doesn't have a wali, then what he would do is he would call the Qadi, and 9 out of 10 times the Qadi will appoint Zuhair, Imam Zuhair, as a mutawalli uqud al-ankiha, giving him authority to perform that particular nikah. So he will say, yani, wallaytuka, I appoint you to perform the marriage of so and so to so and so. And then he acts, or the Imam of the masjid would then act on behalf of the Qadi. Now, as simple as this may sound, we sadly have in our community many such women who have no walis, either on account of being illegitimate children or on account of having embraced Islam, so their fathers and grandfathers are not Muslim. Many such women folk, when they get married within our community, because they would approach perhaps an Imam who's not familiar with this ruling, the Imam would go ahead and just perform the nikah, not asking any questions, and those nikahs are all invalid. Those nikahs are all invalid. Right. Of course, the couple that got married in that fashion, we don't say that they're living in haram. That would be an example, and this is coming in a moment's time, that would be an example of what we call wat'u shubha. They are engaging in sexual relations, but their sexual relations are not considered to be haram. They're not sinful on account of the shubha. The shubha would be the obscurity around the situation. She thinks she's married, he thinks he's married. The Imam wasn't familiar with the ruling that he needs authority from the Qadi, and he went ahead and performed the nikah. So the nikah is not valid, but they understand it to be valid. So the sexual relations that they engage in is not considered to be halal, is not considered to be haram. It falls under the category of sexual relations around which there is obscurity or wat'u shubha. Understand that? So he said that the first thing he needs to ascertain is a lady a virgin or a non-virgin. And then he went on to say, a virgin is a lady who has not yet lost her virginity. What does it mean to lose your virginity? For a female to lose her virginity, it means that the hymen is broken. The lady within a private, there's a membrane, they call it the hymen. If she engages in sexual relations, then that hymen breaks. That's how you determine whether she's a virgin or not. Now that virginity could either be lost on account of sexual relations. Now, and that's the only time we consider her to be the only time she's not considered a virgin if a hymen broke on account of actual sexual relations. So what if the hymen broke on account of one can be very creative. Before, if she went for some she had some sickness and she had to be examined by a doctor, or she herself inserts something into her, whether it's her fingers or something else, and that happens to break the hymen, then even though linguistically she will no longer be a virgin on account of the hymen being broken by Shar'an, according to the Sharia, she's still treated and considered to be a virgin. Similarly, if she loses, the hymen breaks, her bakara, her hymen breaks on account of falling, kasaqtatin. She has a fall on account of the fall, hymen breaks. Or sometimes they say she can have hiddati haydin. Sometimes the hayd that she experiences is so bad hidda means sharp. So it's almost like, what's the word I'm looking for? But she has an intense type of haid that actually causes a hymen to break. That happens very rarely. Then that lady will still be considered shar'an to be a virgin, even though she has lost a hymen. The only instance where she is not when she is no longer considered a virgin, the scholars refer to it as mumarasatul rijal. They say she's still treated as a virgin لأنها لم تمارس الرجال, because she has not been actively involved or sexually involved with a man. No. So therefore she is still considered and treated as a virgin. So that's a virgin. Then what thayyib, he said the thayyib is I just like when would these masail be interesting? They become interesting when, let's say, a man marries off his daughter without her consent. He comes home. One day the father comes home and the father says, Ya binti, oh my daughter Sumayya, I just want you to know that I married you off to Sheikh. You are married now. Right? Now she says the nikah is not valid. He says, no, the nikah is valid. I'm a wali mujbir. The father and the grandfather has the right to marry their daughter that is a bikr, a virgin, without their consent. And now she says, but I'm not a virgin. Right? So now what? They appear in front of the Qadi. The Qadi will accept the Qadi will accept the words of the father, the wali, and not the lady. And if she's examined and they then determine that a hymen has been broken, then even then we'll accept the word of the father, because it's possible that she may have lost her hymen on account of falling or horse riding and the like. Now, interesting masala. Ala kulli hal. What thayyib, the non-virgin, he said, is a lady who has lost her virginity through what? Through sexual relations, irrespective of whether the sexual relations happen to be halal or whether it happen to be haram, or whether she lost it through wat'u shubha. I remember the wat'u shubha that I spoke about earlier? Sexual relations that happened with, that was covered with obscurity. So I gave you a real example just a few moments ago. What time is Maghrib, Zoe? What time is Maghrib? When it's half past, tell me, then I want to stop with this book and move over to you. Bidayatul Hidayah. So, where was I now? What to shubha? I gave you an example. I remember the first time a teacher explained to us what the meaning of what to shubha is. The first time he gave us the example, he made it sound like something that is very hypothetical and not something real. Right? In other words, you mistake your wife for someone else and then you sleep with her. Right? That was, he said, two brothers, they have two rooms next door to each other, and they both go on a journey, and the one comes home and he enters the wrong room and he sleeps with the wrong wife. That was sort of like a very hypothetical situation, which doesn't make sense. But I just gave you a very real example of what to shubha. What happened in my example? A nikah was batil. She thought that the nikah was valid, but the nikah was actually invalid. So that's an example of what to shubha. No. Most instances of what to shubha is when the couple imagines that they are, in a Shafi'i community. Another example would be in the Shafi'i madhab and the Hanbali school and the Maliki school, a lady can only marry with the consent, but through the authority of her father. She cannot get married without a wali. She must have a wali. The wali is generally the father and the grandfather. And in their absence, in the 2 or 3 weeks from now, we will detail exactly who the wali of a lady is. Right? Her father, her grandfather, her brothers, and so forth and so on. We'll detail that in due time, inshallah. So she goes ahead and she gets married without her wali. Where's Ahmed? So she gets married without a wali. So in the Shafi'i madhab, that nikah, is it valid or not valid? What does she do? She gets two witnesses. Her husband to be is present, and she says to her husband to be a fiance or the bridegroom. She says to him that, or he says to her, "Zawwijini nafsaki, marry yourself off to me." And she responds by saying, "Zawwajtuka nafsi, I marry myself off to you." Right? So while some scholars in the Hanafi school may consider such a marriage to be valid, in our community we say that such a nikah is invalid. Why? Because Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that whoever marries without a wali, the presence and the permission and the consent of a wali, sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, فَنِكَاحُهَا بَاطِلٌ بَاطِلٌ بَاطِلٌ. Her nikah is invalid. Right? So now someone got married following that view, thinking that it's permissible, and now they appear in front of us. A Shafi'i Qadi, for your example. So the Shafi'i Qadi says, this nikah is batil. He passes the judgment, it's batil. Like in our Shafi'i fiqh books, they say that the Shafi'i Qadi should consider differences of opinion that exist, and they use this as one of the examples where you cannot consider difference of opinion. He must give judgment that the nikah is batil. So now what happens? They say, yes, but we already have 5 children. So we say, no, you thought that you were married. That was what was shubha. It was sexual relations that took place, but there was obscurity around it, what was shubha. So you are not sinful, and all your children are considered legitimate. Legitimate children. So those are examples of what was shubha. So that lady now needs to remarry. That lady now has to. Another example of this, I had a case where a gentleman, he divorced his wife for the 3rd time. So now you all know that once you divorce your wife for a 3rd time, then she now becomes haram for you. You cannot marry her again. You cannot take her back as a wife, and you cannot marry her again. At-talaqu marratan. Allah said talaq is twice. Then you either hold her or you let her go. And then Allah said, فَإِن طَلَّقَهَا فَلَا تَحِلُّ لَهُ حَتَّى تَنْكِحَ زَوْجًا غَيْرَهُ. If he divorces now for the 3rd time, then she is no longer halal for him until she remarries. She must get married to somebody else. The Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, this happened, a Sahabi divorced his wife 3 times. Then she got married to another guy. Then this guy that she got married to, another Sahabi, he had challenges in having sexual relations. She came to the Prophet ﷺ and she said, Ya Rasulullah, my husband that I have now, he's like this. She lifted up a garment like this. The hadith shows you how real the situations were among the Sahaba. She said, my husband is like this. So Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, لَعَلَّكِ تُرِيدِينَ, perhaps you want to, and tarji'i, perhaps you want to go back to your previous husband? She said, yes. The Prophet said, لا حتى تذوقي عسيلته ويذوق عسيلتك. You need to taste his honey, and she needs to marry, and they need to consummate that marriage with sexual relation. And once that marriage was consummated, if that husband now divorces her and her iddah expires, she now becomes halal again for the previous husband. It's a process. What's the time? 25. Tell me when it's off. I want to end when it's off. Now what's happening? You have He divorced her for the third time, so he wants to know, what can I do now? And this is when knowledge of talaq is very important, and when iddah expires. So in the Shafi'i school, if a person divorced his wife and she's in iddah, a lady that is in iddah, we call her mu'tadda. The lady that is still in her iddah has not yet expired, she's a mu'tadda. A man, if he only divorced his wife once or twice, then during her iddah, he can take her back as a wife. We call it raj'a. So what happens in many instances is, a man divorces his wife, and after he divorced her, she's in iddah, they sort of just get back together. In the Hanafi school, the minute they sleep together, it means he has taken her back as a wife. In our madhab, even if they sleep together 1,000 times, it doesn't mean that she is his wife. Right? In order to take her back, he needs to say to her, Raja'tuki, I take you back as my wife. If he didn't say to her, I take you back as my wife, then he has not taken her back. Now, if they continued living together, even if they haven't been sleeping together, يعني لو عاشرها معاشرة الزوج, if they're living in one space, as long as they're living together, her iddah will continue running. Even if they're living together for 10 years, she will continue remaining in iddah. Right? Because for her iddah to expire, he shouldn't be staying with her. He shouldn't be living with her. That opens the door also for many discussions. So now, the problem comes about is, this happens with many people, they don't take their wives back properly. Then a year later, they give another divorce. And a year thereafter, they give another divorce. That's the third divorce. So in that instance, we will say, well, you never made raj'ah. If you never made raj'ah, she was never your wife. But as long as she was in iddah, the divorce will still be valid. But in this instance, this gentleman, he happened to divorce his wife. Then he stayed with her, so her iddah was prolonged. But she fell pregnant. And when she fell pregnant, she gave birth. The minute the lady gives birth, her iddah ends. Even if he continues living with her after birth, her iddah is expired. She is now no longer his wife. And then a few months later, he gave the second divorce, and a few months later, he gave the third divorce. And after he gave the third divorce, now they come to the Imam, I gave the third divorce, what can I do? Like I've been with our Shaykh rahimahullah ta'ala, on more than one occasion driving with him, and somebody phones him and says they gave the third divorce. Manatullah wasn't like, he was generally a very gentle person. On this masala, he wasn't gentle. I heard him many a time, at least 2 or 3 times over the phone saying, he says, now you want to phone me. You first do what you want and divorce your wife, now you want to phone me. Divorce is a serious thing. If you're considering divorce, first call the Imam, first call the Shaykh and seek guidance. Right? Anyway, the third divorce is given. They came to me, they wanted to know what can they do. And then we determined that since he never ever took her back verbally as a wife, the minute she gave birth, she gave birth, what happened when she gave birth? Her iddah expired. She was no longer his wife. So the second and third divorce that he gave, technically, he was divorcing someone that's not his wife. So the second divorce was not valid. And when he issued the third divorce, he was also divorcing someone that's not his wife. So it's not valid. So I told him that, khalas, your wife, she was no longer your wife from the day she gave birth, some 7 or 8 years ago. The second and third divorce was not valid. You just have to propose and she needs to accept and you can get married again. I hope everybody got that. That was not too complicated. Now, so why did I get into that discussion? I was speaking about what to shubha. So all the sexual relations that he's been having with her from the time she gave birth, in fact from the time he divorced her, is all considered what to shubha. It's not classified as halal, it's not also classified as haram, it's classified as what was shubha, sexual relations that happened with obscurity around it. A lady that lost her virginity in that way is also considered to be a non-virgin. Whenever it was on account of sexual relations with a man, then the virginity would be lost. She'll then be considered a thayyib. So now he's going to discuss ahkam relating to the virgin and also ahkam relating to the non-virgin, inshallah tabarak wa ta'ala. However, we have 10 more minutes left, and Sidi Zuhair and Habib, Wasim, Tali, they are finishing their reading of the beginning of guidance, so فَلَيَتَفَضَّلِ الْمَشْكُورِ.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. من كتاب بداية الهداية تأليف الإمام حجة الإسلام أبي حامد الغزالي رحمه الله تعالى ونفعنا الله بعلومه وبعلومكم في الدارين آمين.
آمين.
فهذا القدر يا فتى يكفيك من بداية الهداية، فجرب بها نفسك، فإنها 3 أقسام: قسم في آداب الطاعات، وقسم في ترك المعاصي، وقسم في مخالطة الخلق، وهي جامعة لجملة معاملة العبد مع الخالق والخلق. فإن رأيتها مناسبة لنفسك ورأيت قلبك مائلا إليها راغبا في العمل بها، فاعلم أنك عبد نور الله تعالى بالإيمان قلبك وشرح به صدرك، وتحقق أن لهذه البداية نهاية، ووراءها أسرارا وأغوارا وعلوما ومكاشفات، وقد أودعناها في كتاب إحياء علوم الدين، فاشتغل بتحصيله. فإن رأيت نفسك تستثقل العمل بهذه الوظائف وتترك هذا الفن من العلم، وتقول لك نفسك أن ينفعك هذا العلم في محافل العلماء، ومتى يقدمك هذا على الأقران والنظراء، وكيف يرفع منصبك في مجالس الأمراء والوزراء، وكيف يوصل إلى الصلة والأرزاق وولاية الأوقاف والقضاء، فاعلم أن الشيطان قد أغواك وأنساك منقلبك ومثواك، فاطلب لك شيطانا مثلك ليعلمك ما تظن أنه ينفعك ويوصلك إلى بغيتك. ثم اعلم أنه قط لا يصفو لك الملك في محلتك فضلا عن قريتك وبلدك، ثم يفوتك الملك المقيم النعيم الدائم في جوار رب العالمين. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته، والحمد لله أولا وآخرا وظاهرا وباطنا، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم، وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. تمت رسالة بداية الهداية للإمام حجة الإسلام أبي حامد الغزالي رحمه الله.
Now, so Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah tabarak wa ta'ala concluded his treatise, The Beginning of Guidance, with a khatima, the conclusion. And he said that this portion, O my young brother, suffices you in terms of knowing what the beginning of guidance is. So try this, meaning apply this in your life. And he said the book was divided into 3 categories, and we reminded brothers about these 3 categories many a time. The first section dealt with obedience, how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He spoke about tahara and he spoke about salah. First your ghusl and your wudu and cleanliness, and then salah and hajj and fasting. The most important aspects of your obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, spiritual dimensions of your obedience to Allah. He discussed ahkam, but beyond ahkam, the mindset and attitude you should have with regards to worship, to your wudu, what du'as to recite while washing the hands, while washing the arms, while washing the face, the du'as to be made after your wudu, right? So he focused on your ibadat, which essentially means your imtithal awamirillah, executing the commandments of Allah. And in the second section he spoke about avoiding or leaving sin, tark al-ma'asi. And the leaving of sin, he said that sin predominantly emanates from the 7 limbs. And these 7 limbs, which were the eyes, the ears, the tongue, the hands, the stomach, the private, and the feet. These 7 limbs, he says, are the predominant limbs with which a person disobeys Allah. And Jahannam has 7 doors. لها 7 أبواب لكل باب منهم جزء مقسوم. Every door has an allocated number of people. The doors of Jahannam, the 7 doors of Jahannam, has an allocated number of people that will enter through it, says Allah in the Quran. And he said that each limb represents a door. A person that disobeys Allah the most with his private will enter through the door of Jahannam that represents the private. As how Jannah has 8 doors. And every of the main a'mal actions that the person engages in, each door represents one of those actions. Like you have al-Rayyan, which is the door of fasting. Then there's a door for salah. And then there's a door for charity. A person whose predominant action is salah will enter through the door of salah. The person whose predominant action is fasting will enter through the door. The person whose predominant action is sadaqah, charity, will enter through the door of charity, and so forth and so on. So he said, tark al-ma'asi, abstaining from sin, from the 7 limbs, protect your limbs. And then he said, but more important than all of that is the heart. Protect your heart from sinning. And then he expounded upon the meanings of the sins of the heart and how the sins of the heart are more devastating than the sins of the limbs. So watch the heart. Know that there are ailments and sicknesses of the heart that will result in your destruction. And then the last section that we covered now, he spoke about your interactions with everyone. Your interaction with Allah. Then your interaction with the scholars. Then your interaction with your brothers, your close brothers. I often made the example of in circles around you. So you're in a circle, and then a second circle, and another tier, and another tier. And then he spoke about your Muslim brothers. He spoke about acquaintances. Strangely, when he came to acquaintances, he told you that your attitude should be one where you are wary, because people generally don't intend good for you, and you need to safeguard yourself. Now, and he said that what I compiled here in suffices for a person in terms of the way he worships his Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obedience and staying away from sin, and his interaction with all creation on the face of this earth. So he said, if you find it suitable and you find your heart inclined towards it, desiring to act upon it, then know that you are a slave who Allah illuminated his heart with Iman, and Allah has expanded your chest. If you find the teachings herein to be something that you are desirous of practicing, you find your heart inclined to doing the good and abstaining from the wrong and purifying the heart, then you are a slave that Allah has guided. On the contrary, he said, if you find what has been discussed herein to be something too difficult and something that should be cast aside and something that is of no benefit to you, you don't think that I need to do anything that is in this book. I don't need to worry about acts of obedience, and I don't need to worry about abstaining from sin. If you find that, he said, then you should know, and you feel that how is it possible that this knowledge is going to benefit me? And just making salah and giving charity and fasting and abstaining from sin and making dhikr and salawat, how is this going to make me better than my contemporaries? And how is this going to cause me to attain a good position by the rulers and the ministers? And how is these things going to cause me to get a good income and sustenance? Then he said, know that shaitan has misguided you. Shaitan has deceived you. And then he said, and if that is your case, then go and find yourself a shaitan that can teach you what will actually cause you to reach Allah. Go look for a shaitan that will teach you go look for a shaitan that will teach you how to achieve all of these things: position, status in the eyes of people, money and income, to win the favor of governments and ministers and all of that. If you're looking for that, you're not going to find it here in the beginning of guidance. You need to go look for a shaitan that can teach you what's going to allow you to achieve that. Now, and with that he concluded, praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, saying that He suffices us. And he said, all praise belongs to Allah, Lord of the worlds. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi sallam tasneeman kathiran ila yawmiddin. And with that, our brothers, Wasim and Zuhair and those who attend the Rawha regularly on a Friday, concluded their study and the reading of the beginning of guidance of Imam al-Ghazali. And those who follow us online, well, alhamdulillah. And we pray at the khatam of this book that Allah accepts our reading of the beginning of guidance, and that Allah makes us from those people that implements its teachings, zahiran wa batinan. Firstly, for Zuhair and Wasim, that they become people of amal, that practice upon the beginning of guidance. Imam Ghazali said that the beginning of guidance is what the beginner in a path traveling into Allah must practice upon, and it's what the person that has reached Allah will still be relying upon. And he said, once the person practices upon this, he said, that beyond this, you will find from Allah openings. And you will find by Allah secrets. And you will find from Allah, beyond that which can be witnessed, there will be unveilings. And there will be openings, and there will be secrets. May Allah grant Wasim and Zuhair and all those who attended, online and present, from the secrets of those who practice upon the beginning of guidance. And from the openings and the unveilings, the mukashafat of those who practice upon the beginning of guidance. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow that this be a first of many texts that we cover together in our Rawha on a Friday. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept. May He grant us sincerity. May He make us from those whom He draw close. Oh Allah, make us from those whom You draw close to You. Ya Rabb, You facilitated and made it possible for us to gather here on Fridays. On this special hour, the Sa'ah Fatimiyya, before Maghrib on a Friday. Ya Rabb, is how You gathered us and is how You brought us and facilitated for us to meet on Fridays during this special hour. Ya Rabb, allow us to reach You. Make us from those whom You have drawn close to You. Ya Rabb, allow our hearts to be connected to You and allow our hearts to be disconnected from all besides You. Fill our hearts with Your light. Fill our hearts with Your guidance. Protect us from Your disobedience. Protect us from Your disobedience. Ya Rabb, protect our eyes. Ya Rabb, protect our ears. Ya Rabb, protect our tongues. Ya Rabb, protect our bellies. Ya Rabb, protect our privates. Ya Rabb, protect our limbs from doing anything that is displeasing to You. Ya Rabb, allow that our limbs worship You. Let us be from those who fast. May we be from those who pray. Make us from those who are generous. Make us from those who cares for others. Make us from those who do good. Ya Rabb, make us from those who study. Make us from those who teach. Ya Rabb, let us become slaves that You are happy with. And let our last be the best. And may we not leave this world save with the recitation of the kalima La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. May our graves be gardens of paradise. May we be resurrected in the company of the pious, the salihin and the anbiya, our mashayikh and our teachers, ala ra'si. May we be resurrected with Your Habib Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and grant us their company in Jannah and protection from hellfire. Ya Rabb, let us not be close to hellfire. آمين يا رب العالمين. بهذه النوايا إيمانا وسلم صالح وسيد الحمد عمر وإلى حضرة النبي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون. سلام على المرسلين. Zuhair and Wasim brought some dates.